Breaking news that I just had to squeeze into this video. At TGS 2020, M2 just announced a brand new Aleste game, Game Gear Aleste 3, for their upcoming collection. A new Aleste game made by M2? That's exciting news. I added footage of the trailer and a brief analysis later in the Game Gear section of this video, so don't miss it. In this video, I'm going to show you the incredibly cool 8-bit Aleste games on the Master System and on the Game Gear, and help you decide if the upcoming M2 collection coming in December is something that you'd want to buy. And if you don't know them yet or aren't excited to play them, I just might change your mind, as they're some of the most fun 8-bit shooters released for any console at the time. But the real question isn't, are they good? You bet they are. But how can you play them? When M2 recently announced their shot triggers treatment for this cool series, I was instantly excited, as these are rare and expensive games, as in hundreds of dollars expensive. So as usual, I'm going to show you some cool gameplay and talk about what makes these games worth playing, and help you decide whether it's a must-buy or a pass based on that pretty steep price. I want to quickly say that after just a few short months, but what feels like at least it's been a year, I finally just passed 1,000 subs. It's that level of incredible support and engagement in comments that keeps me making more videos for you guys. So of course, to celebrate, I've got to do a kick-ass giveaway, right? So stay tuned for the end of the video for details on that, as it's something that a lot of you might find exciting. I know I do. Let's start with the game that really surprised me, the original Aleste on the Sega Master System, as it's one that I'd never played before, and it left me even more excited than when I started. Check it out. If you like your shooters intense, this game is absolutely for you. It's balls to the wall without a break in the action through all 6 levels. Unlike many of the other games I show in videos where I try to pick out the coolest and most entertaining clips to include in the video, Aleste is non-stop. I could pick out just about any sections from any of the levels, and they'd all look like this. Tons of enemies on screen and bullets flying every which way. The onslaught is never ending. I had a hard time editing, as I couldn't figure out which clips to use. They all just blended together into a sea of non-stop action. This is a game where you constantly need to have your special weapon blazing away, as just using your main shot isn't enough to keep the screen clear. That large number on the right shows how much of your particular weapon you have remaining, and these weapons are important, as they also have the ability to destroy incoming bullets, which is critical to staying alive. You can also hold down your shot for a charge attack, which will also block incoming bullets when it's powered up. Luckily, this game has a ton of weapons, several or more, represented by these numbers, and while they all have a limited amount of use, the pickups are plentiful, and it's often just a matter of what you want to grab versus ever really running out. Pickups also grant you a temp invincibility, which you should use to your advantage. What you may run out of, though, is gas, as in collapse due to exhaustion. Toward the final couple stages, each one is broken down into 3 to 4 intense gauntlets, each with a mini-boss at the end, and they just continue to escalate in intensity. I'd keep beating a mini-boss and thinking, okay, that was it, wasn't it? Nope, it keeps going, and going, and going. I started to worry about what the hell was the game going to throw at me next. Although this game does look extremely tough, one silver lining is how many extra lives it doles out. Very much like blazing lasers on the TurboGrafx. Once you get the hang of the game, you can save up quite a few lives pretty easily in the opening stages to use up later once the game gets much more difficult. The extents here are generous, and you'll need them, as if you die on these late stages, have fun surviving until you can power up again. By the time all was said and done, my left hand was exhausted, and I can't recall last time that was the case. Well, at least not from playing a video game anyway. But look at how impressive this is for an 8-bit Sega Mark III game. Sure, it's got some slowdown when things get really hectic, but you'll almost welcome it with how intense this game can get. It constantly has a ton of action on the screen, and the graphics are bright and crisp. In typical Compile fashion, the music is catchy as well. That's really all I ever needed from a shooter, to make me feel like a badass, plowing through the hordes of enemies and bullets, and Aleste does just that. What would I like to see M2 include as extras for their release? Without a doubt, a no slowdown option would be insane. As if you couldn't tell by the footage, playing this at a constant full speed looks like another Shmup-gasmic experience waiting to happen. A second great option would be an audio select for either the PSG or FM music, as in the case of Aleste, I feel the PSG chiptunes absolutely rule, so being able to choose between the two would be very welcome. Extras like that would absolutely help make this a must-buy, so if you're listening, M2, get on that post-haste. You've still got a couple months to make it happen. Anyone passing this game off due to its older graphics and look is missing out on one intense shooting experience, and one I'll be revisiting again when the M2 launch happens in December. I had way more fun with this game than I had any right to, and if I'm feeling hyped for a continuous onslaught, this is one game that won't disappoint. Hell of a game, right? Who knew? Well, what about Power Strike 2, often considered the best shooter on the Sega Master System? Amped up graphics, even more levels, does it live up to the hype and make the upcoming ALESTE Collection more worth the price of admission? Given that the original sells for over $400, not to mention that you need a PAL console and a proper display just to play it correctly, that's probably a safe bet. But market price aside, is it even better than the original? Let's take a look. So first off, this game has an intro and a backstory now, and I gotta say, it's freaking depressing. In the early 1900s, after the Great Depression, tons of people were laid off from their jobs. In a desperate bid to survive, many pilots became sky pirates and have begun to rule the skies. My job as the pot hunter is to kill these poor pirates, like a bounty hunter. It literally says, "These poor pirates." Talk about a heavy burden for an 8-bit shooter. In fact, it shares no story with the original, as the true Aleste 2 was only released on the MSX. So this is a completely unique game created exclusively for the SMS. The lead character's murderous tendencies aside, you'd guess right that this game is a stunner as far as the Master System goes. But it's not just about the sprites, but the creativity on display. Levels are extremely creative, with hazards that open up from the ground, environments that change as you progress, and even try to kill you, and seriously large bosses, with patterns to learn and overcome. Quite a step up from the more basic mini-bosses of the first game. The music is also pretty darn cool, as you'd expect from Compile, with a cool intro tune and catchy level tracks. The weapon system has also been changed, with there no longer being an ammo limit on the special weapons. What you may notice here is that the game seems to be running a bit faster than it should be, and you'd be right. This game was only released in PAL territories, adding to its rarity, so it was developed to play on a 50Hz console and display, meaning when you play it on an NTSC Master System or emulated without any adjustment or fix for that refresh rate, the game runs faster than it should. That includes the music, which is sped up as well. I don't have to speculate and can only assume M2 adjusted that for their collection, so you'll be able to play it the right way. Would I still like the option of playing it sped up? Absolutely. While it's not a true sequel to Aleste, clearly it has many similarities, and it's a showcase as far as the SMS is concerned. Is it better than the first and the best shmup on the system? In any objective measurement, you bet your ass it is. Everything about it is impressive for its time. That said, it may be a bit of a hot take, but I think I actually loved the gameplay of the first even more. It was more manic and never gave you a break, while this game is better balanced and plays more like a traditional shooter, at least in that regard. And for most players that don't have a screw loose like I do, that's probably for the best. As far as reasons to pick up the M2 collection come December, this incredibly impressive game, along with the original, are reason enough for me. I had a blast with both. Now, whether it's worth the high cost of admission for you is something we're going to take a look at. But let's not forget, it also includes 2 Game Gear games in the M2 collection. So let's check that out next. My first impression of Game Gear Aleste was, clearly this game wasn't meant to be played on a large screen. Its screen resolution was lower than the SMS, and meant for the small Game Gear screen, so it's not going to look so hot blown up on the monitor. The initial stage doesn't do much to wow you either, with a very simple background and very basic enemies and patterns. I was expecting something more akin to the SMS games, but initial impressions were not the best. But as often is the case, Compile can be relied upon to make lemonade out of beer nuts, and it's not long before their creativity is back on display. The stages do become more interesting with varying scenery, large battleships, and some good tunes as they usually are. Although the resolution is lower, they do take advantage of some cool effects, such as the waves on this water stage. We aren't playing Game Gear to brag about the graphics anyway, right? But it's worth mentioning that they get far more interesting after that bland initial impression. Unfortunately, the hardware rears its ugly head again, often with some pretty significant slowdown. It takes very little, as you can see here, for that to happen. I know authenticity is important, but if M2 is porting this, a no slowdown option so the game runs smoother would go a long way to improving the experience. You also get these occasional bonus stages, which start out with a cool cloud effect, but really are just a bland set of incoming enemies to kill, and trying not to miss any. And you get a boss here to take out as well for some extra points. Oh, and unrelated, but tell me that sound effect isn't a bit like blazing lasers. I do love how Compile likes to reuse many of their sound samples across all their games. It kind of ties them all together with a hint of nostalgia. Where the game really falters though is the difficulty, at least for me. It was pretty easy the whole way through, and aside from a couple late game sections, there really wasn't much of a challenge to be had. In this version, your weapons are letters instead of numbers, and there's a good selection, as always. The P power-ups also make a return, and picking them up slowly increases the power of your main weapon. The gameplay is pretty basic, without much nuance, and any seasoned shoot-'em-up player may not be too entertained for long with this one. The final stage has you descending a base level by level. Each area ends with a mini-boss, followed by a descent to the level below, which is a cool touch. I'm also not sure about the backstory for this Moonchild, but it makes me think the Death Star had a baby with Jane Fonda, and this was the evil yet new age result. And I gotta give credit where credit's due. The cool tunes in this game are classic compile. They're a bit on the cheery side, but it fits the game and aesthetic, and is one of the things that help keep me entertained during my playthrough. I did like the final boss designs too. Like, am I the only one that sees a chihuahua head here? Or is it more of a panda face? Next up is the Buff King, but at least this dude has an interesting attack pattern and takes a bit of skill to finish off. And look, it's the Moonchild, I knew it. But is her head growing out of yet another dog face? Or am I just obsessed and seeing pet faces everywhere I look? Oh god, now she's angry. Wait, did I just kill her dog? Look, it's all blown up and bloody down there. What the hell did I just do? I actually really dug this boss design. As you continue to destroy layers, it gets bloodier and more mangled, and eventually, the machine comes out. Whoa, honey, you got real ugly. I'm actually not sure what this thing is that pops out of her, but that's the end of the road here. Time to wrap up, and the game gives you a bit of an ending as well. Hello, nurse! What could M2 do to make this entry stand out and add to the value of the collection? Without a doubt, include a no slowdown mode. Some games, you can tell the developer didn't intend for the slowdown. It's just a hardware limitation. That would go a long way to fixing my #1 gripe with this entry and making it a much more challenging and hopefully enjoyable experience. So how about part 2? Did Compile come back with a better handle on the hardware and a more interesting difficulty? Initial impressions were way more favorable, at least in the gameplay department. Right off the bat, the enemies come in with way more incoming fire, and actually caught me off guard a bit for an opening level. And it's definitely a more interesting and impressive opening stage. Although, I'm not sure what these random crates are just floating through space. Damn it, Ripley, did you dump the airlock again? And the stage 1 boss is this shuttle that's been overtaken by a giant alien squid. Ah, now I get it. The crates came flying out of this shuttle when it was destroyed. Cool thinking, Compile. You make me proud. You continue through what looks like more remnants of a space station, and you can see that the first stage level design is a good step up from the first game. And the stage boss is good for an opening level, giving you some stuff to dodge without being too complicated. But what I found is the trick in this game is to get the right weapon, as there's one that is so overpowered that it turns a lot of the sections that would be difficult into more trivial affairs. That would be a powered up neo-napalm gun, or the letter N. The explosions on this bad boy take out most of the enemy fire, so instead of dodging, you can just eliminate it. And it's like putting the game on easy mode for the majority of the trip. And you know what the anime girls say about that. Now, the original Aleste on the Master System had the same feature, but it wasn't nearly as powerful and almost required to help keep the screen clear of all that crazy bullet hell. But here, it just annihilates most incoming fire while doing massive damage. In fact, at a couple points, I switched my weapon out to something weaker just to have a bit more fun, as this game does have a good bit of incoming fire, and it's fun to dodge around, but the napalm just sucks the life out of the challenge. If I play this one again, I'll likely try a playthrough without using that weapon at all. You can also get a shield to take an extra hit, making the game even easier. Coupled with respawning where you die, again we have a lack of challenge. You even get some bombs to drop in this one, but to give you an idea, I forgot I had them and failed to use a single one. This game also has bonus stages, but in this case, they did make them a bit more interesting, if not out of place, as it switches to a pseudo 3D Space Harrier type view. It's definitely more interesting than the last game, but it's still very simple and doesn't really add much. I did want to mention that although this game was also confusingly called Power Strike 2 in the West, it has nothing to do with the game you saw earlier on the Master System. While it definitely shares some of the DNA, the plots are not linked. It's just another way our marketing geniuses like to confuse everyone. This late game boss, along with the end boss, is well done and can actually kick your ass the first time through, and has a fun pattern to dodge. I would have loved if more of the bosses showed this kind of creativity and challenge, but alas, it's a great parting moment in an otherwise passable entry. The final boss isn't as creative as the Moonchild from the first one, and the ending doesn't give you a nurse to ogle at after all is said and done, but without a doubt, the game overall is an improvement over the first. To sum up the two Game Gear games, I'd say that they're well done on a technical level, given the limitations of the Game Gear. Maybe the hardware just couldn't push enough bullets to make them more of a challenge, or maybe they're just made for a more casual audience, which would make sense. In either case, they're both fun to play once or twice, but I don't see coming back to them very often. It's pretty clear that the meat and potatoes of the upcoming M2 release are the two original Master System games, and if it were just those two alone, I'd be just as apt to buy it, even without the two Game Gear games. And now, check out this brand new trailer for Game Gear Aleste 3, made by M2. Pretty impressive looking for a Game Gear game. With the brief footage, here's what I can glean from it so far. They're definitely trying to push the Game Gear limits, as in this brief clip, the bullets in action seem to be moving pretty smoothly, despite all the incoming fire on the screen. The previous games would have been slowing down significantly with this much going on, so that gives me hope that the new release will have very little slowdown and be a more challenging game. I also noticed this same napalm weapon, like from the second game, that destroys enemy bullets. Hopefully it won't be quite as overpowered in this one, so it doesn't unbalance the game in your favor. Presentation-wise, they're going all out, like with this background with individual rotating sections and larger destructible objects, like in this clip. Based on the excellent Rebirth series that M2 did on the Wii Virtual Console for games like Gradius and Contra, I'm pretty excited and expecting a cool game. Given some of the shortcomings of the first two Game Gear games, we could be in for a treat that may exceed the quality of the first two. If you were on the fence about whether this collection was worthwhile, this kick-ass announcement may just put you over the edge. I mean, a brand new Aleste game in 2020 made by M2? For me, that's pretty exciting. What worries me about the upcoming M2 release is that it'll mostly be bought up by collectors and never make it into the hands of new blood that may not have heard of them but would really enjoy them, given the opportunity. If they included something like Musha Aleste and Super Aleste for the Super NES, Super Famicom, the two 16-bit entries, they would have had some serious name recognition and excitement, and by default, I think many more that picked it up for the two more popular games would also end up trying these two amazing 8-bit ports and discover a couple great games they didn't even think they were worth playing. And I wouldn't need to make this video at all, because everyone wants Musha, even if it's already been ported and emulated many times. But here I am, shilling for these two awesome 8-bit Aleste games. But are they worth $60 to $70 for just the basic package? Now that's a tough call. On the one hand, the originals go for a small fortune, hundreds of dollars. This PAL-only Power Strike 2 is a few hundred by itself, and on top of that, you can't play it as intended without a PAL console or a 50Hz display. So the idea of having both on a modern console, in addition to the great extras that M2 Shot Triggers brings to the table, it's tempting. And if you're a fan like me, or a collector, I can see springing for it. But personally, I feel that a digital-only release should be much less expensive, in the $30 to $40 range, or less. That way collectors can pay a premium for their physical copies, and everyone else can download and enjoy the game. Is the price too steep? Do you think it's worth 70 bucks? Or did you dig the footage, but you'd rather wait for a digital download or a cheaper alternative? Either way, I hope that this video was useful in showing you how incredibly cool the two Master System games are. And when M2 eventually does release in December, I can do another video, go over the features and what they actually added on top of the games themselves to help you decide whether it's worth the price. So as promised, here's what I'm going to give away. Your choice of either a brand new TurboGrafx 16 Mini, because you know I had to, or if you already have one and you want something a bit more meaty, you can choose my extra RGB modded PC Engine Duo R.
No way!
Yes way.
Excellent!
And it's all thanks to the incredible support that you've all given me. I'll take that 1,000 subs and put it up against any other 1,000 on YouTube. So if you haven't already, don't forget to hit subscribe and that bell to get notified for when that video comes out very shortly. I also want to quickly mention that the official Shmup Junkie slush fund is open for business. That's right, I now have my very own Patreon. While making these videos is incredibly hard work and takes up a ton of my time, I also have a blast making them. So much so that I want to try and make it sustainable, long term. So if you want to throw in something extra for the videos that I work on, I've got a link in my description, or just go to Patreon and search up Shmup Junkie Slush Fund. I've already started posting sneak peeks and early gameplay footage on there. We'll do live chats, Q&A, that kind of stuff. YouTube is kind of a tough place to interact. So for those of you without Instagram or Twitter, it's just one more way for us to chat and communicate, and part of what makes this channel such a fun place to be. Anyway, if you're still here and you're new to my channel, check out some of my other cool videos. I've been doing all kinds of series on Shooter 101, top 5 most brutal shmups, even all kinds of tech videos with lag tests and HDMI, and you can check out a couple of them right here, or more in my playlists. And I hope to see you for the next video and giveaway. And until then, smoke 'em if you got 'em.